Greetings all, I am Seminary Scholar, and this is my channel where I discuss the beliefs of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, I have attended the Church's Seminary and Institute programs, and I am a member. I am not, however, an official representative, so if you want to see what they have to say for themselves, check out the links in the description or poke around their website for yourself at churchofjesuschrist.org. Today I wanted to do another of my perspective essays, and I wanted to focus specifically on questions. Because in our church, we have a very special regard for questions. We believe that questions are the way we reach understanding, and that there is really no other way to understand something other than to question it. Because if we are just acquiescing to what has been placed in front of us, then we aren't really learning. We're just following blindly. And that is actually something that is strongly discouraged in the church, because that leads to a lot of unfortunate situations where you are either following someone who is correct, and that's all good and well, but you don't know for yourself. And so when things get difficult and when you are eventually presented with things that you just can't ignore, you kind of tend to topple over. And if you are following someone who isn't correct, then that's also bad, because you're just... It is always better to know for yourself what's good and what is wrong, because sometimes you're the only one you can ask, because you're the only one who knows your situation. You're the only one who knows what's happening, and so you need to be personally familiar, because you cannot defer responsibility for your actions and for your life onto someone else. And that's why we think questions are important. So important, in fact, that the church has developed a system for people to run through to help them answer their questions. This is called the ASK system, or the Acquiring Spiritual Knowledge system. And it consists of 3 steps, which are act in faith, examine the question through an eternal perspective and in the proper context, and seek understanding through divinely appointed sources. And I'm going to kind of break these steps down. The first step is to act in faith. And as I mentioned before, we are not asking people to follow blindly. When we say act in faith, we are saying, hi, something brought you to the point you're at right now. Some combination of events and experiences and personal convictions brought you to the point where you are asking this question. Don't forget that stuff. Don't forget why you are here. Think about it. Be rational. Don't abandon what you've already established and what you already know. It is very likely that you just don't understand what's being said. Because perspective is a funny thing. And I remember thinking about the phrase, truth is relative. I don't believe truth is relative. I believe there is such a thing as absolute truth. But it is so vast, it is so multifaceted, that we can have genuine, true experiences that for all the world seem to contradict other people's experiences. And so we are inclined to think they're wrong, because how could anything that is so different from the truth that I have experienced still be the truth? And that's just the thing, is it can. In fact, in his address, I forget the title of the address, but it'll be in the description, Elder Uchtdorf talks about the poem about the 5 men from Indostan, and they go and they try and see the elephant, and they're all blind. And they go to see the elephant, and each of them stumbles upon a different part of the elephant. One stumbles upon the tusk and says the elephant's like a spear, another on the trunk and says the elephant's like a snake. And they're all right. They're all right. There is the tusk of the elephant, which is like a spear. There's the trunk of the elephant, which is kind of like a snake. But they're all wrong, because an elephant isn't just like a spear. An elephant isn't just like a snake. And this is the experience that we have as we're trying to figure things out. And my point in this is, don't abandon what you know about something just because somebody has told you something that seems to contradict it, or someone reputable. And this comes to our next step, because now we've established don't panic and drop everything when you're confronted by a question. Instead, keep moving forward. And this is that step that we take to keep moving forward, which is to examine issues in their proper context. I remember I had a very particular experience with a passage in Corinthians. And in this passage, Paul is telling the Corinthians that it is not good for women to speak in church meetings. And that kind of got some questions out of me, because it was so contradictory to everything I had experienced in the church. I was wondering what this passage was doing in Corinthians. And so I looked into it a bit more. I believe it was the church's New Testament Institute manual. Could have been the seminary manual, but the point is I looked into it and I found that this was referring to a very specific situation where in the church in Corinth, there was a group of women who were speaking out in meetings and contradicting established doctrine. They were trying to preach their own doctrine as though it were official church doctrine. And that is the specific thing that Paul was trying to counteract here. And it was a matter of perspective, because standing from where I'm standing in, 2016? That seemed entirely unreasonable. But when I took some time to slow down and to look at the proper context, I could see what was going on, and I was able to understand something that I hadn't before. And this brings us to our last step, because I mentioned that I looked in either the seminary or the institute manual for that passage, and what I ended up finding was I ended up finding the context through a divinely appointed source, because in our church we have many, many sources. Anything you find on churchofjesuschrist.org that I mentioned earlier, we consider that all to be doctrine. And so it's not just scriptures that we're searching out of, and it's not just scriptures or comments from prophets. We have an entire database of articles that are written specifically to communicate these ideas clearly. And it's very extensive, and it's really something else. But there are many, many resources out there from our church to help people to understand and to come to terms with their questions. And there is something that I think people tend to be concerned about with this last point. And that is that if we are seeking knowledge from divinely appointed sources, then we're looking at the same source. But the thing is, it circles back to that first principle. Remember what brought you here. Because people who are using this method, people who are trying to work here, they aren't here out of happenstance. They're not here because they just kind of got plopped down. They are here to one degree or another because in their life they have decided that this is a good thing to do, that this is a good church to believe in, this is a good philosophy and a good religion to have and to keep. And so in a way that they have already personally vetted these sources. And that's part of coming to understand things, is you ask a little question and you get a little answer, and then you ask a medium question and you get a medium answer, and then you ask a big question and you get a big answer. It's building up. It's a matter of trust, not blind faith. Because faith is good, but blind faith it's one of those things where we use the same word, but it means something different. Because blind faith, in my mind at least, is not really faith. It's apathy. It is a lack of willingness to care enough to understand what you're doing. And so in my mind, the term blind faith means something entirely different, even though it does use the word faith in it. But yes, this has been a brief analysis of the acquiring spiritual knowledge process. I get a kick out of it. It's one of my favorite parts of being a member of this church, is asking questions and finding answers to questions. It's just delightful. It's one of my favorite things. And I hope that this has been helpful or insightful to you in whatever way you are applying it in your life, whether it's academic or whether you're a member and this is spiritual. Thank you very much for sticking through with me to the end, and I hope you have a great day.